Surf Tech Channel, episode 2. We have the Chilli Bv2. I'm James, I'm your main host. I'm 5'11", 185 pounds, and I ride my Bv2 in a 5'9" by 20 by 2 7/16. It comes in at roughly 30.5 liters. I have my guest hosts with me here, Corey Miller. Corey, thanks for coming.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Height, weight, and then what you ride yours in.
Sure. So I'm 5'7", 170 pounds, and my board I ordered custom, and it's a 5'6", 19.5, 2 7/16. So it's similar to the stock dims, just a little wider and a little thicker, since I'll only be riding it on East Coast waves.
Awesome. And then you got yours in the Twin Tech EPS.
Yep, that's right. Yep.
All right.
Comes in at 28.5 liters, and I just go for as much float as possible around here.
So I guess first and foremost, like, what would your normal shortboard be roughly, so that, just to see, you know, if someone's going to get this and scale down?
So if I were going to go just for performance shortboard, I'd come in about between 27 and 28 liters.
Okay.
Depending on how often I'm wearing a wetsuit.
So you went a little up, like you,
Yep.
Yeah, I know beforehand we were talking and you had mentioned you went volume up for the wetsuit purposes and all that.
Yeah. So my previous performance board was a little over 27, and I finally just accepted the fact that I spend 9 months of the year in a full suit. Added a little more volume to this one.
This one is actually a little bit less of volume than I would normally ride. It was interesting that it paddled really well. I was expecting, all right, this is kind of iffy, I don't know, you know, I questioned it, and I just tried it, and it still paddled really well. Mine is just a standard PU construction. This board is really interesting because it's actually the first board that I rode as like a 2+1 setup. I got it on a trade and whatnot, and I read up on it on Chilli's website, and he said that a lot of the team riders liked it as a 2+1. Yep. I went and got the Mick Fanning 2+1 set, FCS2. And I can honestly say, like, this board kind of rejuvenated my surfing. I rode it all throughout the summer. Got back on it when we started talking about this episode, and actually tried it as a thruster with an AM2 fin template. And it went really well in kind of everything.
Yep. So for me, I ordered this board as part of a 3-board Quiver from Chilli.
Okay.
And I guess I should shout out to Paul from the California factory. Gave me a lot of helpful recommendations and shipped them all in one box to save some money.
Sick.
And so for this one, I designed it to sit in the middle of the Quiver. So I ride it in 3 to 6 foot waves, 3 foot if it's punchy, 6 foot if it's not so hollow. And because of that, I ride it mostly as a thruster. So I've been using the H4 by FCS2. And on smaller days, I will put in a 2+1, but I'll use a 2+1 where the trailer fin is on the larger side. So I have the Machado 2+1.
Okay.
And they both feel great.
Yeah, you kind of get more control, more like a thruster feel, right?
Yep, and I've tried it with the MR 2+1s and actually didn't like it, just because I ride it on bigger waves. I felt it to be a little too squirrely.
Yeah, I was gonna say, condition-wise, like, you got it in the middle of the Quiver, so let's go over like where ideally you would use this board. This
board will only be used here on the East Coast, so I don't bring it anywhere. So I'll ride it, you know, 2 to 3 foot if it's punchy and hollow, and then up to 6 foot if it's not too steep or too hollow. So it's really a performance, for me it's a performance board, but a little wider, a little flatter, you know, accepting that I like a lot more paddle power and a lot more forward volume for speed. So, and also accepting that since I'm a little heavier for my size, I can throw it around a little more than you know, than other people can. So I can account for the extra forward volume just by muscling through it. So, you know, it just shows you kind of know yourself and know your conditions when you order a board.
Yeah.
And it'll do well.
Definitely. It's funny, like, interesting you touched up on it, because I 100% agree. It's like very performance. Kind of find it really similar to like a Channel Islands pod mod. They're kind of in the same spot of my Quiver. I'd bring them out in similar conditions. I found this to be a lot more high performance, so to speak. The rails like are a lot lower. I know on their website it says they're mid rails, but I think he hides so much foam up in the middle of the board. It's kind of like, if you look at it, it's kind of flat up to here where the nose starts to flip, you know?
Right,
and then it's broad out over the rails. So the rails are really low, I found. and it's like very sensitive.
Yep.
Like
it feels good. Yeah, I have no trouble sinking a rail on a turn.
yeah.
I hardly ever bog down. It's really a good mix, you know, of all the attributes I would want.
Yep.
And that said, I never grovel in it, so you know I don't want to have to be like hopping up and down and putting a lot of effort in generating speed. So
Yep.
so for the waves I want to ride it in, it really goes well.
I'm still in a little bit of denial. Back to my early years. If I'm going up from this, I'm going to like a high performance shortboard. So this kind of sits in my quiver, kind of like a gravel board. And I found it for myself, it groveled really well. Like I'm a little bit heavy, I think, for this volume, and it surprised me every time I rode it. You know, I was like, wow, surf high tide gravel stuff, I'm feeling it's like really slow. I don't feel like I'm doing anything, and then go back and watch footage of it, and it's like, wow, you know, you can pull off some turns that you didn't think looked that great, but it's really concaved out the bottom. And it carries over like flat sections, high tide stuff, you know.
Yeah, yeah. As I looked at the bottom, I noticed kind of the double inside single concave, but maybe not as extreme as some other boards that I've ridden. And for me, that's fine. I just, you know, I like to keep it simple and what works best. I feel like it's really well designed for how I surf and for what I surf. And even as you said, even on good waves, I feel like the speed is perfectly matched. Like I don't feel like I'm flying, you know, unless I'm really pumping hard. But you know, even as I watch footage, I'm kind of always in the right spot.
Yeah, it holds in the sweet spot.
Right. The shape matches, you know, the waves.
It likes to be surfed in the pocket.
Exactly. Which is something I needed help with growing up on the East Coast. I'm used to outrunning the wave.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, like a couple turns, I really surprised myself, like going vertical and like releasing really well and coming down with a lot of speed into the next maneuver. You know.
Yep.
It does that really well, which that surprised me as well. You know, you read up on it,
Yep.
like you said too, they call it a gravel board,
Right.
but for here East Coast, like it handles really well.
Yep.
We'll tangent into like what do you think it does well, really? Like what are the best things that it does?
Right. So it carries speed over flat sections almost as well as a graveler. You know, certainly not as much as the really flat wide boards, but that's expected. And it turns really well, almost as well as a traditional performance board. So for me, it's the best of both worlds. It paddles well. I don't miss many waves, but you know, there's a few waves I'll miss that on my super graveler board I might catch. But again, all those things are expected, you know, based on what you want out of the board. So for me, it's a really good mix of everything. And again, knowing yourself, knowing how you surf, the things that maybe aren't optimal are things I know I can overcome just by how I surf.
Ability. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Ability and power.
I guess we didn't touch on that in the beginning, but what would you say your ability is?
So I've been surfing about 40 years. I think for the East Coast, I'd consider myself advanced.
I have to blow up your spot a little bit, but you are a Belmar Pro champion, right?
Yeah. Yes, thank you.
Belmar Pro held right behind us. 18th to 16th Avenue in Belmar. Corey Miller took out, what division was it?
Senior men's.
Senior men's?
Yeah, 2 years ago.
That was awesome. Good conditions for that event.
Yeah, pretty good. Yeah, fun. A little dumpy, but that's East Coast.
So we can definitely call you an advanced surfer.
Thank you.
I like to say I'm like upper end intermediate, lower end advanced. You know, I'm always ever teetering, getting better every day.
Right,
but
right.
I'll say what I think it does well. You pretty much touched on a lot of this stuff. Goes over flat sections well as surfs vertical in the pocket well. It does, you know, kind of has the best of both worlds there. Paddles well for what it is, you know. One thing I find too, for like a fishier shape, the nose is kind of pulled in.
Yep.
It's more high performance, not as much volume. Like it does have volume forward, like you said, where the volume is carried up this way.
Right.
But it's not so much volume forward where you have that round classic fish nose, you know?
Right. So before this, the board that really got me into Chili's and got me into, you know, kind of more modern shapes was a used cherry pepper that I just picked up, you know, randomly to give it a shot, and that had the much more rounded nose.
Yep.
And I loved it, super fast, but always could tell a little bit of performance was missing just due to that wide round nose, and so this is kind of a step, you know, a step away from that, but still maintaining a lot of the good attributes.
We can go into what it does not do well.
So for me, the only thing I find, which I can't really fault it for because I knew what I was getting, is that on bigger days with really late drops, it probably doesn't handle them as well. So I can't really knife a takeoff right into the barrel. I will occasionally nosedive, whereas on a board with a full rocker, I may not. But at the same time, you can't have everything. So, getting a little more flatness, a little less rocker, I expect that. For me, that's about it.
For me, what it does not do well, I know you didn't find the same problems, and every surfer surfs a lot different. I don't know if I surf more weight back-footed. On the rail-to-rail stuff, like if I did a rail turn and started kind of sliding it, it was really hard to get it back on the other rail and set it to come back. That could be fault of riding so many different boards. Like once I got used to it, and kind of mentally thought about it, set it a little bit sooner the opposite rail. But a lot of times I found myself in no man's land where I'm flailing backwards,
Right. I guess, it wasn't until recently people started talking about more front-footed or more back-footed, so I never really thought about it for myself. And the only reason I think I'm a front-footed surfer is because I look at the deck on some of my boards, and the front foot is just hammered, like almost a footprint, deep in there. I'm probably just have my weight distributed a little differently.
Another thing, I can't call it something that it doesn't do well, but I wouldn't recommend this board for a beginner surfer. Maybe squat it out if you were to order it custom, but looking at the stock dimensions, I think a really advanced or professional intermediate surfer would get the most out of this board,
Yeah, I'd say maybe a lightweight intermediate could do well on it, like a teenager who's still pretty thin, where they could use a little extra volume. But yeah, I would agree. Probably not a beginner. I still think this has a really nice sweet spot for the front foot. Even after all these years, I'm still pretty inconsistent about where my front foot lands sometimes.
I agree 100% with that, because I've found myself, and like I'll put some clips in, but where my front foot's all the way back here on like a steep section, and it kind of pulls it back. But then I've also done turns with my front foot all the way up here and brought it back, where that sweet spot, it gives you a lot of room for forgiveness.
Right, and for me too, side to side, if I ride anything much under 19 inches wide, I have trouble. If I don't nail my front foot placement, I'm just kind of all over the place.
Yeah, they go side to side a lot quicker.
Yeah.
The Twin Tech construction compared to like a poly, what do you find pros and cons of that?
So I mean, I have to be honest, I don't notice flex patterns in a board. I just noticed it floats great, paddles great, and goes nice and fast. It's more durable, I've never broken an epoxy board, and I ding them a lot less. So that's what I notice. I do it mostly just for durability.
Yeah.
And a little extra float, especially in the winter with the 5 mil on.
We touched on it in the last episode, how theoretically the flex pattern lasts longer. Overall score, we go on a 1 to 10 scale. Last time we did a bunch of attributes, but I think we covered pretty well everything, what it does. But overall, 1 to 10, what would you give this board?
I'd give it a 9. I mean, I don't think there's anything as a perfect board. So I don't know if I'd ever give anything a 10. But for what I wanted it to do, it's almost perfect. So I'd give it a 9. Maybe just a hair more nose rocker, but again, that could just be a different board.
So we'll say in condition for this board, conditions 2 to 5 foot, anything choppy, clean, barreling, not barreling, mushy, 2 to 5 foot, you're giving it a 9 out of 10.
Yeah, exactly. Anything where I don't have to really work hard to grovel for speed.
Yeah.
9 out of 10.
Just based off of the criteria that I did for the Happy Everyday episode, you got this board for a purpose. It fills that spot in your quiver, 9 out of 10. Yep. I'm gonna go my scale out of everything, just because it's if I want to get one board and ride it and everything and not have a quiver, and for someone maybe that can't get 3 boards, and has to get 1 board, I still did the math and it came in at like a 7.95. So I'll give it an 8 out of 10, and that's everything New Jersey. Yep. That's when it's big, hollow, when it's 1 foot. I have a bunch of clips of it 1 foot because it's 1 foot a lot, but it came in at an 8 out of 10. Which
I would agree. If you made me ride this in as a 1-board quiver, it would probably be a solid 8 or so.
Yeah, awesome. If you have nothing else to say, I think we can conclude.
No, thanks.
Awesome, Corey. Hey,
thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thanks for tuning in.